So it's great to see you all, okay? And hopefully we'll be able to have some fun the next hour and a half. Since we're streaming but we're not on Zoom, I'm hoping that the levels will be the correct levels. So those of you who are on the live stream, if you have any comment, you can send me an email, okay? And I'll be checking it maybe in a few minutes. So if you cannot hear me well or anything like that, just to let me know. My email is apriven, P-R-I-V-E-N, @bj.org. So you can apriven@bj.org. You can email me. I'll check the email in a few minutes. You will remind me to check the email just to make sure that people can hear me well and that if you have any questions. So we're going to be I'm going to be calling the page numbers on the left Shalem, which is what we normally use at services. If you at home have a different Siddur, just look for a Siddur that has the sections for Shabbat. So I can also call the numbers on We're just starting. So the other Siddur that that you might have is Sim Shalom. So just join the circle. Just don't be in the second row. There's going to be one row, and as people come, we may expand the circle.
So you want us to be? You have to go to the front.
Front.
Out of two, it's okay for me to step out, right?
No. You have to be. We're learning together. Out of tune and tune. It is not. So, for those of you in the Zoom, Sim Shalom or the left Shalem. So before we actually, Eleanor, you can use left Shalem. Left Shalem. I'm just talking to the people on the live stream who might not have left Shalem at home. So, first of all, welcome, and thank you for coming and making me feel like we can sing together. Otherwise, I'll be like talking to someone in the camera back there. So, which is a nice feeling. During COVID, I've done many of these sessions on Zoom, but it's so much nicer to actually have you all in person. So, I'm going to start actually. Again, I cannot do it with the people on the live stream, but those of you who are here, how familiar are you with the service of Friday night in general? Do you have, let's see, if I have to say, are you familiar with the text? So we should all turn off our phones and make sure we have. I didn't, so that's a really good reminder for those of you who are in person to have that.
There's no Zoom today. Wait, is there Zoom?
There's no Zoom. It's live stream.
Live stream. Yeah, to a free rate. She's calling from Brazil. Monica, it's live. It's
the usual live stream that it appears in the media.
She here. That is beautiful. Thank you. You gotta have it to show it off.
So if anybody calls you, is the page on the BJ side, that when it says live stream, that main page will actually have.
Oh, it will? Okay.
Yeah, it's right there. And it should be, eventually it's being recorded, it will not be under services, but it will be under, if you go to live, by date, you'll be able to find it. Great. So, one more time. How many of you are already familiar with, from a text point of view? Or yes? how many of you those of you who are not familiar, can you read the text at all, or you feel like you need help finding the text of the Hebrew, or to following the text?
Her Hebrew is work in front.
Okay, so
Transliteration.
correct. So the good thing about Lev Shalem is that there are actually many things that are transliterated. I personally feel like the transliteration might actually be a bit confusing if you know Hebrew, but if you don't know Hebrew, there's a transliteration. Plus, if you don't know, if it's going too fast even to sing the words with the transliteration, just sing la la la. Okay? We could potentially think about using, let me rephrase it a bit. There's no way that in 2 hours we'll be able to learn Hebrew and learn a melody. So we have to be realistic as to, if you come to service often and you follow the service, I promise you, eventually, you're going to start by sound, you're going to start getting the familiarity. So today is an opportunity for you to ask questions, for me to frame how certain things work, and just for you to have a sense of the choreography and the melodies that we normally use. But from a text point of view, and even from a melodic point of view, in 2 hours, this normal service on Friday night lasts an hour plus, and we do different melodies, so there's no way that in an hour and a half we'll be able to really drill and drill and drill on all the melodies that we use. So just be compassionate to yourself, knowing that whatever we're going to learn today is going to be somehow, hopefully will be like a little step to make you feel more and more comfortable towards the service. But coming to services, and again, there are some people here that have been coming to services for a long, long time, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I will say that probably the first time you showed up, unless you were coming from a place that actually had similar melodies, the first time you showed up, everything seemed foreign. And then as you come more often, then things start clicking and you start owning those things, and the same thing goes with the text. So it happens to you, it happens to me, it happens to all of us. So be patient with yourself. Okay, that's number one. So I'm going to start with something that is much going to be extremely basic on certain aspects. So I don't want you to think that I don't want to lose you on that, but I just for you to get a sense. There's a tradition from a music. So actually, let me go back a little bit. Those of you, I don't know how much experience you have with music, but the way that most of us listen to music is within the scale of. Okay, we're not accustomed to the quarter tones that appear in other cultures. So for us, it's like a major scale would be. Okay, a minor scale would be. Okay. In other styles of music, there are different kind of scales. So, for me, I'm not talking about BG. I'm talking about Jewish music. In the Jewish tradition, the music that accompanies services are somehow a bit of inspired by something that is traditionally done in Sephardic communities. Although I'm going to show you how that applies eventually to the Ashkenazi melodies and all that we do. But there's something called makam. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So in Western music, we divide the scale. Okay, that's what that sounds familiar to you. Okay, in Middle Eastern music, there's something that instead of going the full scale with the 8 notes, where the 8th note is the same as the octave. In the makam modality, it's more like each one is. So each one is a fourth. It's a scale of 4. Okay, so those two scales together will be the same as the major scale in music. but it's
all Jewish music?
no.
Or just the Middle
I-
Eastern?
No, I'm talking about more like it's going to be what will apply to the concept of nusach, and I'll get that in a second. But so in music, that is a modality that will appear to us as a major scale. In the makam, it's basically two short scales. One will be, which is a full step, and a half a step, and then full step, half step. Okay, both combination of a whole step, half a step, followed by the same structure of whole step, half step, is the same as a major scale in music. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because we need to be closer. That was reserved. That's it. So we need you here. You can sit next to Eleanor. Or be part of a circle. Part of a circle. We broke the circle so that because there were not that many people initially, so we want you to be closer. So there's something that's called nusach. I don't know how if you're familiar with that, but the concept of nusach applies to two separate things. One is related to like if you go to an Ashkenazi synagogue, the Sidurim might actually have slightly different text than if you go to a Sephardic synagogue. So the Sidurim follow this different nusach in terms of like, it's sort of like a different tradition as to which are the words that are used. So there are basically three major groups. The ones that we are the most familiar maybe for us is the Ashkenazi Sidur, which basically is like the Sidur that we have is mainly an Ashkenazi Sidur. Then there's also what is called a Sephardic Sidur. And then there's also something called Sfarad, which is not Sephardic, but it's actually more like the Hasidim. Like if you go to a Chabad shul, they're not going to use Sephardic, and they're not going to use Ashkenazi. Although they are Ashkenazi, they're using something that is somewhere in between. And they're using, but it's not that important, but I just want to point out that the word nusach, sometimes it refers to what the text of the liturgy, okay? And if you go to some synagogues, you will hear the Kaddish, they add a few words. So that's actually slightly different traditions within the Jewish community. Now, going back to nusach from a melodic point of view, in the Ashkenazi music, I'm not certain, I don't know exactly if some people think that the nusach came out of maybe, or developed out of the tradition of chanting Torah or chanting Haftarah. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it is likely that some of these melodies were influenced between Sephardic tradition and Ashkenazi tradition. And that's why I brought up these scales that are slightly different. So in the Jewish tradition, one of the scales that is not so the typical tradition is what is called Avarabah, okay, which Avarabah is actually one of the prayers, and many people associate with that melody. We don't use Avarabah with a particular melody that will trigger that memory, but if I sing Avanagila, okay, now it's not a major scale, okay, it's some people, Freilich, it's also like, some people call it like that, but it's similar to when we sing Mizmor LeDavid, Avul Adonai Bnei Elim. So some of those scales are not really part of what it's not really part of the major scale, not the minor scale either. So it's a slightly different modality that the Jewish, this nusach developed into this, mainly these couple of forms. One is called Avarabah, which is the one that I just showed. Then you also have Adonai Malach, which is more is much closer to what is a major scale. There are other ones, but the other one is Magen Avot, which is more like a minor scale in that sense. But just an introduction for you to, when you're gonna hear, if you go to a traditional shul and on Friday night, like when we sing, that's kind of like a traditional nusach on an Ashkenazi shul. Okay, we used to sing in that modality, and now we are for many years already. We've been influenced by a more contemporary rabbi called Karl Lebach, he passed away by now more than almost like 30 years ago, and there's a shul, the Karl Lebach shul, which is on 79th Street. He was a rabbi, was brought up within the Chabad movement, and eventually became this very famous rabbi for his composition, and he's probably one of the most prolific composers of Jewish liturgy of the last 100 years. So he sings, and we sing Lechu neranena l'Adonai, instead of saying Lechu neranena l'Adonai naria etzurishenu. So he was coming from, he tried to compose something, but trying to keep within certain tradition of that modality. He felt like the kind of scale that was used for the traditional service of Kabbalat Shabbat should be used also here. So let me just go back to a different kind of question, which is, I don't know how many of you participated in the sessions with Becca that she's been doing over the last few weeks. Have you? One, okay. Okay, so I want to touch on some of the things so that you're aware of. So today we're going to be concentrating on Friday night, okay? We have an evening service, by traditionally every day there's an evening service, okay? And the structure of the evening service is somehow similar pretty much every day. On Shabbat, the evening, what is called the Arvit service or Ma'ariv, is somehow similar. There are some variations in particular within the Amidah, but from a structural point of view, is somehow similar regardless of which day of if it's a holiday. There are many, I would say, all of the elements that appear on a weekday, for the most part, appear on Shabbat and appear on holidays, okay? Different holidays like Yom Kippur and Kol Nidrei, the service expands a lot, but on Shabbat, expands a little bit, but not so much, and actually the Amidah is actually even reduced. It's a silent Amidah, so it doesn't really affect us from what we're going to be doing today, but from a liturgical point of view, what comes before the Amidah is pretty much the same, besides one line that appears before Barhu. So just to say, Arvit, from a liturgical point of view, was always there with some variations for Shabbat or for holidays. Now there's another section that was added more like in let's say 500 years ago, in the 16th century, in the 1600s or 1500s, there was a movement that happened in Israel, in the city of Sfat, okay, coinciding with a number of things that affected that many scholars actually started developing and moving to this city in the north of Israel, Sfat, and it had an influence both from a liturgical point of view, from a text point of view I'm referring now, and also from a point of view of law. Like, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is probably one of the most important sets of code of law that when we talk about halacha, is based for the most part in that original work by a rabbi in Luria in Tzfat. So all this time is like all this really developing of happening both in how to codify Jewish law and it's also happening in Kabbalistic, and it's also happening from a point of view, like I don't know how many of you are part of like the sessions with Rolly sometimes when when we work on Piyutim. There were a lot of Paitanim, many people who wrote different Piyutim around this time as well. So let's say when we sing Lechadodi, it's also from this time. So it didn't, if you were to go to a shul 1,500 years ago, nobody even heard of Kabbalat Shabbat. That's something that developed centuries later. So what we have now, both in the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic tradition, and by the way, you can call that to be a huge influence of Sephardic tradition for the Ashkenazi tradition. It's something that the Ashkenazi communities were already pretty well formed by that point, and somehow the Sephardic influence that was happening in Tzfat brought the Kabbalat Shabbat to both the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi communities. So right now I'm going to concentrate a little bit on Kabbalat Shabbat. So Kabbalat Shabbat, it comes from the word of lekabel, to receive Shabbat. So it's almost like the Kabbalistics, they felt that there was a need we cannot just move into Shabbat right away. So the same way I was saying that Arvit, this evening service is similar for every single day of the year, the Kabbalistic felt like there was a need to do something special for Shabbat, and you couldn't just jump into the evening service. So they felt like there was a need to create a structure to welcome Shabbat by creating this service of what is called Kabbalat Shabbat. Okay, and Kabbalat Shabbat, in a nutshell, is basically a series of psalms. Okay, that each one psalm per day of the week. Okay, and then there's El Hadodi, and then there comes the two psalms for Shabbat. So Sunday through Friday, each one will get a psalm. So when we sing Lechune Anena, in a way that psalm represents Sunday, okay? Which in a way in Kabbalat Shabbat is just a sequence of psalms, a recitation of psalms. It happens to be that most of the psalms from Sunday through Thursday is a sequence from Psalm 95 through, so it's basically, if you open the Siddur on page 11, so page 11 and page 12 has the whole psalm, which is Psalm 95. Okay, and if you go to the next page, so page 13 and 14 has the next psalm, which is Psalm 96. Okay, and like that, it's a sequence of psalms that the rabbis of that period felt like those psalms could actually be used as trying to welcome Shabbat. It's almost like, I don't know if they were actually thinking, okay, I'm singing Lechune Anena, and I'm thinking, what is that I did on Sunday? Okay, and then I'm going to sing the next psalm, and I'm going to think, okay, what is that I did on Tuesday? Okay, the one that is out of sequence is the one for Friday, when we sing Mizmor LeDavid. It's Psalm 29. It's out of sequence with these five psalms in the book of Psalms, but in the Kabbalat Shabbat that's the sequence that these rabbis in a way came up with. Okay, so they created this structure of having, for the receiving in order to receive Shabbat, let's sing these psalms to recall the days of the week. Then we'll sing Lechadodi, and then we'll sing these two psalms in honor of Shabbat. And then yes, we're going to be ready for Shabbat, for the evening service. So far, so good? Okay. So this has nothing to do with music, but this, correct, has to do with how this developed. And again, if you were in I don't know, I'm assuming that the sessions that Becca did are probably also recorded. I think if they are, I think she went much more into depth of these kind of things. Now, what will also happen is that one of the Piyutim that is also developed is within that period is the Piyut called Yedid Nefesh. Okay, Yedid Nefesh was eventually added by different communities as almost like a warm up for the warm up. So if you think about the Kabbalat Shabbat is the warm-up for Shabbat, then Yedid Nefesh is the warm-up for the Kabbalat Shabbat. So there's something about in the liturgy in general that keeps expanding. So like it's not like when there's a term in both, in particular in music, that in Jewish music that sometimes is used, but also sometimes in liturgy as well, which is called Misinai, as if like something came from Sinai. But we know that some things didn't come from Sinai. Some things are like much more contemporary. That's what we say. Even it's 500 years old, Sinai happened way before that. So Misinai is a way of saying, oh, it came from a long, long time ago. So Kabbalat Shabbat is definitely not Misinai. Arvit, as we know it, is not Misinai either. In a way, the liturgy in which we know the services, in a way, was an attempt by the rabbis after the destruction of the temple to be able to do services without sacrifices. So there was no temple to make the sacrifice, so then we have to create a new set of rules of how we pray. So in a way, prayer, as we know, is more like an establishment of the last 2,100 years ago, if you want to think about it from that point of view. And it's not Misinai. It's based on something that Misinai, you could potentially say in the Torah, refers to, you have to do a sacrifice. Eventually that sacrifice became the Amidah. Okay? And the Amidah is the center of all of these services. Again, Kabbalat Shabbat doesn't have an Amidah because the Amidah belongs to the evening service to Arvit, and Kabbalat Shabbat is just a warm-up for the service of Arvit. Okay? Okay, so let's go to music so we can actually have fun singing a little bit. So, as I was saying before,
Or you should check your email.
yes. Thank you for reminding me. No, because I don't know if people in the live stream, because we're on Zoom.
Monica emailed you?
Sorry?
Monica
No.
from Brazil?
No? No?
I'll text her
Okay.
because she went to the hearing.
Okay, so hopefully some of you are on the live stream, and hopefully you're able to hear me well. I didn't see an email. If you do have any comments or questions, you can send me an email to apriven, APRIVEN @bj.org, and then if I receive an email, if we have time, I'll check my email again.
Where's the camera?
Those cameras are there. There are two cameras on the bookshelf. We use it for the minyanim, so with this setup. Yeah. Anyway, so let's go back to. Actually, let's go back to the very beginning. Page 10. So okay, now this is we by now is part of, for us, in the BJ tradition is part of Kabbalat Shabbat, but again, in reality, it's actually part of in the BJ tradition, in many synagogues, the tradition of singing Yedid Nefesh before Kabbalat Shabbat. Let me go back a little bit. Yedid Nefesh is like a warm-up for Kabbalat Shabbat. In many Sephardic communities, they actually sing from the book of from Song of Songs, okay? From Song of Songs, the book of when we sing Dodi li vani lo harohe, that's from the book Tanakh, the Bible, the Jewish Bible, is divided into three main sections. Torah, which is when the 5 books of from Genesis through Dvarim, when Moshe dies, that's the first set of books. Then the book of prophets that has where the Haftarot are coming from, and the book of writings. In the book of writings, there's a huge amount of text that influence liturgy in general. For sure, one of the most important is the book of Psalms. So there are Psalms all over all over the services. Kabbalat Shabbat is definitely mainly singing Psalms. Okay. Another set of books within the book of writings, which is the Ketuvim in Hebrew, is actually Shir HaShirim. the Song of Songs. Many in the Sephardic communities, instead of singing Yedid Nefesh, or in addition to sometimes singing Yedid Nefesh, might actually recite sections or the whole song of traditionally, again, they're talking about some things eventually got shortened by because it was not realistic for people to do it in time. But in our case and many synagogues, Yedid Nefesh is that warm-up for the warm-up. So okay, so you're familiar with the melody. We don't need to sing. If you're not familiar with that, we're in a good place. Let me just see if I can announce the page.
So is that Sephardic?
That's an Ashkenazi melody. For those of you who are on the live stream and have left Sim Shalom, is on page 252, page 10, 252 on this book. Okay. On Lev Shalem, the red book, is on page 10. So this is just one melody. So an important part of what I was saying before about when I was referring to Nusach, when I was saying, if you go to a traditional shul, all of these psalms likely will just basically be sung in that modality. BJ, as well as many other places, started being influenced by other styles of music, and we might actually maybe still sing Lechuni Adonai, which is a Karl Levach, it's a more contemporary melody, but it's still within the modality, okay? But also bring melodies like maybe it's a major scale, so it's not that different, but it's completely different than the Nusach. So that's one of the parts that makes it definitely a little more confusing to be in a synagogue like BJ, because not only that we jump from Nusach sometimes to a song that is more like a clappy song that might actually have more like a structure of a song, but also that maybe the Shir Adonai that we sing in the Shabbat might be different than the next Shabbat. Okay? By the way, I'm going to just say something regarding in the Sephardic tradition, I was referring to Makam, this, okay? That's one Makam, and in the Sephardic tradition, depending on the Shabbat, they do a different scale. So the Nusach that they use varies from Shabbat to Shabbat, okay? It's not that they have 50-something styles, but let's say if the Shabbat is a much more celebratory type of Shabbat because of the parasha of the week or the time of the year, they might use a scale that is much more celebratory than at a time near, let's say, Tisha B'Av, because they use a more mournful tone. Okay? We don't do that. So they are actually confusing. If you go to a Sephardic tradition, it's a Sephardic shul that follows the Makam, you're going to hear different things depending on which Shabbat you go. Okay? Which might actually be confusing. In our case, it's confusing because we actually have different options of melodies for different things. So each one chooses whatever the complexity of what. But let's go back to Yedid Nefesh for 1 second. So, Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman. So that's what we normally sing. But sometimes we will sing Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman. We sing it more like for like Hadodi. That's right. Okay? So it has absolutely nothing to do with Nusach. Okay? It's a good point. But in a way, when I sing, if I sing a melody that Karl Levach composed, Leonard Cohen and they're somehow contemporaries. Okay? So, no, they're contemporaries. So you could potentially give value to to both. Again, one was a rabbi, the other one was just a composer, so it might actually give more value to Karlebach, had definitely more influence in Jewish music, but by now, this melody, that the Hallelujah from Leonard Cohen, is actually used in so many places. Sometimes we sing it for the Halodi, sometimes we sing it actually we do a Hallelujah, Psalm 150 on Saturday morning. So there's something that is important to point out, which is we do it, and actually many communities have done it for centuries, which is to borrow melodies from something else and to apply it to liturgy. Okay, so the best example for me is when we sing Ma'utzur Yeshuati Lecha Na'el Shabeach. That melody is most likely a melody that was actually borrowed from the church. We don't. I am not certain that the church, any church, actually still uses that melody. Okay, but the Jews somehow kept it alive. Okay, because somehow a Jew was maybe walking by a church, heard that melody, and took ownership of that. Okay, there's a nigun that some people in the Chabad movement sing, and some people think that it's a Chabad nigun. Okay, it's definitely not a Chabad nigun, but it's a Chabad nigun. If you go to Chabad, so many people in the Chabad community, they borrow that. Again, when we sing. They're all coming from the same melody, okay? Which is, and there were classical compositions that were written within those melodic lines. So again, it's borrowing melodies from something and using it in something else. We don't do it anymore, but we used to sing in sections of the Shabbat morning services, in the Kabbalah Shabbat actually. We used to, I'm trying to remember which it was. There was an opera that Marshall used to love to sing, and so we had one was an aria. And many other places have influences of, again, in the Sephardic community is extremely common to borrow a melody that someone heard in the bar in a way, and bring it to shul, okay, and eventually owning those melodies. Just to say, this is an animal that is alive, and it keeps switching, it keeps changing all the time. Again, I've been here at BJ. Rolly was celebrating his 40th year. I'm almost, I came in 89, so you can do the math. So it's in the high 30s that I'm here. And I can tell you, since I've been here, we've been influenced by different things over the last 40 years that made us actually change how we do services. Okay? Some things are things that we've been doing for longer, and so, let's say Aleinu is something that we probably have not really touched much, but overall, once in a while you're going to hear that something will change. So if you're one of the old-timers and you took a break and you were not coming to BJ for the last 5 years, then you come back and you say, what's going on? Okay, or maybe not 5 years, but definitely if it was 10 years or 15 years ago. It's enough that things keep evolving, like we keep adding different melodies. Go ahead.
There are also, if I may add, to your eloquent presentation
okay.
to us, and there's other stylists have emerged, and we know who they are from being a BJ, Hadar,
Great.
Rabbi Cantor, etc.
Great. So Hadar is a good example when we sing, but we don't do much of them on Friday night, but yes on Saturday morning. On Saturday morning there are more things that we actually do, and we can, when the next session, which is next week, is going to be Saturday morning. We can go over those melodies. Like Shochenad is a good example. Shochenad, it's a group of people who are younger than all of us, okay, in this room, And they're composing, there are people who are maybe, I don't think in that group there's anybody who is that much in their, like, maybe in their 40s at the most, okay? Most of them are in their 30s and plenty in their 20s. And they're writing melodies to liturgy. And many communities are taking that and are using that as the liturgy.
It's morphing into the mainstream in many cases.
Correct.
Like the Hatar movement,
Correct.
Joey Weisenberg.
So it's correct. So Joe is the oldest of that group,
That's what
probably.
we're doing here.
Again, when we've been doing, let's say, we've done it already several times. There's a service that we started a number of years ago for a community, what we call Aviv, which is the 20s and 30s.
Oh,
Okay, so Aviv was much more influenced by compositions either from Hadar, they were composers of the last 20 years that maybe wrote things for camp, and someone will actually sing those melodies in camp and say, let's do those melodies, and they are using, if you ever go, whenever there's an Aviv service, if you pick in, again, we're not supposed to go in because we're not in the 20s and 30s, but if you listen, you're going to realize it doesn't sound like what we do at services. But this is a part of this evolution that melodies keep switching. And likely, again, we've been doing it several times where the Aviv, some of the leadership of Aviv lead with us when we do these services where we are sitting down and we are in a circle. I don't know if you've been in any of those services in the last few months. Some of the melodies that we are going to be bringing, hopefully will be some of the things that they are actually exploring in their own experience on Aviv. And that's how, in a way, we do this dance of learning melodies from other people, seeing influences from so many places. I would say probably, and I can look, if I just think about it, what was the influence during the 90s, what was the influence of the first 10 years of the 2000s, what about the last 15 years, which were the different influences, and you can start saying, okay, for whatever reason, we were influenced by X. So call it Karlebach. As the Nusach for Karlebach, we were not using it when I first came here. So when we sing, Karlebach had already composed that, okay, years before. But we started using it maybe 25 years ago. I don't know how many years ago we started using it. And like that, many synagogues started adopting different traditions, which, going back to this confusing quality of us switching melodies. In the past, if you go to a traditional Ashkenazi synagogue and you always have the same nusach, it didn't matter if you go to a shul here, or if you were in Europe, or if you were in California, or if you were to Argentina, the melodies will somehow be similar, okay? The way in which the music in the Jewish tradition is developing is actually going at a pace that is out of the box. We cannot control that. And you might, whenever you're gonna go to a different place, you might recognize some melodies, but not all of them. And definitely when people come to BJ, they might actually find that many melodies are not familiar to them, but some are, hopefully. So going back to Yedid Nefesh, so one is Yedid Nefesh, but there are other melodies that sometimes we use, like Yedid Nefesh, Avara, it says too high, Yedid Nefesh, Avara Haman, Meshoch Avdach, Eretzonach, and it has a similar quality as Yedid Nefesh. It's the same kind of minor quality to both. Then another melody that is sometimes we use for Yedid Nefesh is Yedid Nefesh Avarach Haman, Yedid Nefesh Avarach Haman, Meshoch Avdecha. Okay? Actually, that's a good example of the text of Yedid Nefesh. There are different traditions. So like I'm singing, I'm actually maybe singing something that is not what you see on the left shalem. So if you go to different shuls, the text is maybe slightly different. Again, I'm saying way too many things and maybe way too confusing for some of you. I apologize for that. You can stop me whenever you find that I'm saying something that doesn't make any sense. Okay? Hopefully some of it makes sense. So I just went through a couple of melodies that we use at BJ for Yedid Nefesh, and all of them are somehow traditional. So if you go to other places, you might actually hear those melodies as well. Okay. Now going back to Kabbalat Shabbat and this sequence of psalms that I was referring before, in general, we sing Lechu neranena l'Adonai naria letzuri sheinu. Now, sometimes, and this is kind of like, you can blame Rolly for this, but Rolly loves piyut hymn, and there are many things that, in this case, it's not a piyut, but it's within the Sephardic tradition, there are other melodies that sometimes are used, and one is coming from synagogues in Israel that have adopted, or some even composers in Israel that some have adopted melodies they have composed things, some compositions maybe were written based on Sephardic melodies for that particular text, but they did it in a more contemporary way. And then those compositions became, like, again, right now you can see right here, these are the, like, for us, it's kind of something that we use. These are the different things that we can actually open the service with. So Yedid Nefesh has the one that we did, the other one that I just showed. Sometimes we actually sing sometimes. Igalena, ufros chaviv alai, etzukat shalom. Okay, that's actually just one line of Yedid Nefesh. So we're singing different things sometimes within Yedid Nefesh, or sometimes we may actually start the service as the warm-up. Instead of it being Yedid Nefesh, we might actually start with a nigun, okay? Which a nigun basically refers, mangina, nigun refers to melody. In general, whenever we refers to nigun, we refer to a melody without words. So if we sing, that's a nigun. Some people might actually take the nigun and put it to words eventually, but we might actually even take something that was composed for some words and just use it as a nigun, both ways, okay? But again, right here you see that we actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 things that we potentially can choose. In general, we tend to just go for that Yedid Nefesh that I did before. Yedid Nefesh. Last Shabbat, those of you who were at services probably heard a Moroccan melody, which is Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman Meshochav El Retzonach. Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman Meshochav El Retzonach, which is from a stylistic point of view of saying it's completely different than starting in the service with Dai 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 Dai, but it actually gives us more of a colorful. Right now, again, we spend a lot of time talking about modalities, but in the first hour, we barely move the needle on the Friday night. So you can actually, if you go deep into something, you can spend a lot of time, okay? So, Lechuni Anena is another example of something that is, sometimes we sing it with that nusach, the Karlebach nusach, Lechuni Anena, but sometimes we sing Lechuni Anena Ladonai, Naharia Letzuri Sheinu, Nekat Mafana Betoda, Bizmirot Naria Lo, okay? It's based on, I think we learned it from it.
Karina?
No, this is, sorry,
She did it with the kids.
this melody,
Before
this melody,
when she was at the 92nd Street, why
she did?
What they call it,
Shababa, Shababa, something
And
like that.
she did.
She did this melody,
Some of those melodies.
but right now,
I thought we took over from her.
we actually, there's a composer and writer called Ehud Banai in Israel, and we learned it from his recordings, was being used by some synagogues in Israel, but I'm pretty sure that he actually was what I was saying before, of using melodies that are traditionally, in some tradition, in most of it, in his case in particular, he is influenced a lot by Sephardic music, and he adopted to do this style. The fun thing about this Lechonei Arena, again, you might call it fun, you might call it crazy, is that the same way that we have a major scale and we have a minor scale, which is most of the Western music pop music is written in one of those two modalities. There's also the concept that the rhythm in which we sing, most of the things are going to be either in 4, Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, okay, Yedid Nefesh, Avarachaman, okay, and there are other melodies that were written in 3. Yedid Nefesh is in 4, but it's actually 12. Those of you who know music, it's actually 12/8. So it's each beat is actually in 3. Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman. And most melody, if you think about tan 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 tan, most music that we are accustomed is either going to be in 4, could be in 2, which is a multiple of, okay, so 2, 4, or in 3. When we sing Lechonei Arena that we just did, it's actually in 5, which is, it's confusing. So it's Lechonei Arena, if you think about count, you have to count to 5. Lechonei Arena Ladonai, Naria Letzurishenu, Nekat Machfana Betoda, Bizmirot Naria Lo. So in general, when you clap, but in that melody goes, Lechonei Arena Ladonai, Na 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1. So it's a fun part of that melody. We don't really do much in 5 in other things, and it's for us, for anybody who shows up for the first time and try to sing it, they're gonna feel like 5 might actually feel like is either rushed. Is it like a 6 that you rush, or is it a 4 that you're waiting too long? Okay, but all these modalities in a way create a different atmosphere for different melodies, and it gives a different flavor. Besides the scales, you have this modality of tempo, the signature of the tempo, plus the tempo itself. If you go faster, it might actually feel more celebratory. So even if you do Shiru Ladonai, Shir will feel different than Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash. It's the same melody, same meter, but the tempo is actually faster. So, and then also, I don't want to go too much into that. I'm going to be too confusing. But this is a good example of 2 different ways to approach, that we approach sometimes exactly the same psalm. Lechonei Arena is this first psalm that, as I said before, represents Sunday. Okay. Then the second psalm is a psalm that we tend to sing more like a song. It happens to be that the text of Shir Adonai, which you find on page 13.
It says though, just a quick thing, the Hunurana, it is a song, it seems like, because it says Psalm 95 at the end of it.
Sorry?
The Hunurana, I think is a psalm, though.
No, Lechonei Arena is a psalm.
Oh, it is?
The psalm is in most of the room will be in one page.
Oh, I see.
There because of whatever they took 2 pages. If you look at Shir Adonai, okay, when in Sim Shalom, it's on page 254, both Lechuni and Shir Adonai. So again, you can see in Sim Shalom, the texts appear consecutive because each psalm was after the other one. This Siddur did not have the transliterations, so there were more commentaries on the side on Lev Shalem, which made it more interesting to look at and to read and to learn. But yes, you get into the trouble of that you actually have the psalm is actually divided into 2 pages, which doesn't affect so much Lechuni and because in general, unless we sing it as a song when we do the other melody, in Shir Adonai when we normally sing it, you actually have to turn the page in the middle of the psalm just because of the layout of the book, but that's a detail. So Shir Adonai, one of the melodies that we normally do is Shirul Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shirul Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Okay, that's a melody that, going back to Karlebach composed like a large number of melodies. This is one of those. He wrote it for something else. He wrote it for Kibbutz Moed, something else. But we, as well as many synagogues all over the world, use it for Shir Adonai. I'm trying to... Yeah, but we don't do that melody so much as BJ. Sometimes we sing another Karabach melody. Shirul Adonai Shir Chadash, Shirul Adonai Kol Haaretz. Another melody that we do for Shir Adonai. I'm blanking on the melody. Again, it's also Karlebach melody. Okay, Karlebach did not compose it for this. We sing it to this. He actually wrote it for something that is part of the High Holidays. That is when he wrote it for one line for that. And again, we sing it again. When I was saying before about this modality that appears in the Nusach, which is more like a major scale, is similar to Shirul Adonai, but if I sing da 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 da, or if I sing they're both minor. Okay, so it doesn't have the modality of the traditional major scale that you will actually hear in if you wanna more like a purist on Nusach, but. This is just some examples of some of the things that we do for Shirul Adonai, which definitely has many melodies that we use. Then we move into, normally for the next psalm, for the next psalm, in general, we just stick to the Nusach. Let me just say one more thing, which is, in Sim Shalom, you will find that sometimes you will find a little square before the text, and in Lev Shalem, you will find a little arrow. So if you look at page 16, you see that it's an arrow right before the word Ohavei Adonai. Okay, on page 16. In general, those arrows or those little boxes refer to the place where the person who's leading might actually start singing. Okay, there's a concept in davening in general in prayer which is called something called Hatima. Hatima means the seal. Okay, so we're going to get into examples of Hatima more in Arabic. Hopefully, we have time. But we don't recite every single word. In some cases, we do it. So when we sing Shir Adonai, we will recite the whole psalm. When we did Lechoni Anena, we might sing just the first couple of lines, and then we sing the last few lines. So you're going back to page, in page 12, you see an arrow on Arba'im Shana. Okay? That is like, if you were to go to a traditional shul, they might only sing that out loud, they might actually sing just those few words as a way almost like to be a synchronizer, so that people know, okay, where the person that is leading is already up to there. So if you're behind or if you're ahead, you know where everybody else is kind of like more like, I call it the Hatima is the seal of in the case of the Hatima as a concept of Hatima belongs more to the evening service or the morning service and not necessarily to Kabbalat Shabbat, but here it serves the same purpose of being the synchronizer. Okay, so if you look at page 16,
You're supposed to be saying everything else in your head.
That's right.
and then-
Correct. And that's why it is common that you're going to hear that suddenly we're davening, we're singing something, and then we continue on page 15. Okay, but 15 is actually silently. So then you're supposed to just recite those words silently, and then at some point we'll start singing together on page 16, which is this ending of this particular psalm. Okay, in this case, the arrows are more like for the traditional nusach, and doesn't really go well with what Karlebach wrote or the way that we sing it. So in this case, we sing Shama v'tismach Zion, which is on page 16, but it's the fourth line, and it's not the arrow that you see there. Okay, so sometimes that's another confusing part, that you don't have a visual cue to help you find, okay, where is that person singing? So if your Hebrew is good enough, or if you're really familiar with the liturgy, then you can actually find your way. But if you're struggling trying to figure out the words, you're going to definitely get lost in no time. So one thing that I will definitely encourage you to do, if you have the ability, is to get your own book and start putting markings. Like the good thing about our service is that we stream our services, and all of the services are actually in the YouTube channel. So if you went to services 3 weeks ago, and you wanted to learn how to sing that particular melody that we did 3 weeks ago, you can just go to that YouTube channel and listen to that melody over and over and over until you get it. Used to be that the only way for you to learn the services was you have to come every Shabbat, and hopefully after repetition and repetition, you will get more familiarity. And I will definitely encourage you that. Both will actually help you in getting the knowledge to be able to participate, but obviously coming to services you'll do it in community. So it's not only that you're davening with people, again, right now we have a minyan here. We have the 10 of us, okay? So if you didn't know someone who is in the group of 10, okay? If you come to shul on Friday night, you might say, oh, you were in that class. And that hopefully will help you connect with that person, okay, in a different way, and have a conversation. So being at services is not only about the possibility of participating in the service, but also to be in community. So that's a sales pitch for to come to services.
And we can consult each other before the quiz that you're going to give.
Correct, exactly, of course. So again, going back to Shema v'tismach, it's a good example where it's almost like it's a modality of change within the same nusach of Karlebach. So again, we're on page 16, okay? page 256 in Sim Shalom, on Psalm 97 towards the middle, okay? Shema Vatismach is pretty much in the middle of the page on 256 or page 16. So you're going to hear Shema Vatismach Zion Vatagelna Benot Yehuda Leman Mishpatecha Adonai. So that melodic line will repeat somehow. Ki ata Adonai Elyon al kol haaretz me'od na'aleta al kol Elohim. And suddenly at this point where the arrow is, it goes more to the modality similar to Lechu niranena u'avei Adonai sinura shomer nafshot chasidav. Okay, so this is a good, perfect example where something has almost like has the modality of the nusach for the very last part with the arrow, and then there's something else that is added before that probably was not even written at the same time. Okay, but in a way became the way that we and many other shuls daven that psalm of this mix of two different melodies. Okay. Then on page 17, you have the beginning of Psalm 98, and then on page 98, on page 18, you have the end of the psalm, and you're going to hear again the same modality. Again, I'm going to what we normally do, which is Yiram Hayam Umlo, which is halfway on page 18. So it's the last few lines of Psalm 98. Yiram Hayam Umlo, Tevel Veyosh Veva, Ne'arot Imcha Uchav, Yachad, Harim Iranenu, Lifnei Adonai Kiva. And again, Lechu niranena l'Adonai. Same melody, same motif of melody that in a way is this modality that if you hear it, you know that you're in a Karlebach style of Kabbalat Shabbat, which is not that different than if you do like each. Okay, this is an important part. I should have said. Each service within different traditions. I said before that the Sephardim actually have for each Shabbat a different makam and different scale that they use for each Shabbat. Each service, so if it's weekday morning, will have a slightly different style of music than if it's Shabbat morning. And it will have a different style of music if it's Rosh Hashanah morning. Okay? It's almost like the idea of the leitmotif, this modality, these musical lines that will somehow evoke a particular service. Again, let's say Mincha of Shabbat has even a different melody, so it could be the same text, and if you even, I'm talking about in a very traditional context, each service within the Ashkenazi community has its own flavor, okay? That's kind of adds to the complexity of how the services will sound like, but it also will actually, hopefully, once you own many of these melodies, and it definitely takes time, once you own these melodies, it's almost like you will feel like, oh, Shabbat, oh, Rosh Hashanah, okay? So like all these melodies in a way are supposed to evoke something. Again, the melody of Mincha of Shabbat when we sing. If you've never been to Mincha, this is completely unfamiliar to you. But if you've been in service on Mincha Shabbat, you will start realizing that there basically is just a couple of melodic lines that melody A, melody B, melody C, and we just switch within those melodies. And those melodies are definitely not as celebratory as when we sing Lechu neranena l'Adonai, which is much more a happy thing, because we're about to start Shabbat. Mincha is more like a sleepy time. I just took a nap, I woke up, and Shabbat is we're about to say farewell to Shabbat. So some of these melodic lines in general go together with an expression of what the service in a way and the time of the year, or similar to what I said before about the Sephardic tradition of having Shabbat, different Shabbatot depending on what is read in the Torah, being more celebratory. And then, so for sure when they were singing Shirat Hayam for Shabbat Shira a few weeks ago, probably that Makam was much more celebratory. I don't know, this Shabbat we read Mishpatim. So those of you who are lawyers might be very happy that about all the laws, okay? But some of them, those of us who might not be that happy might feel like there's too many rules. So like it might not be such celebratory, and then let's not have such a celebratory melodic lines there. Again, it doesn't really influence so much our style at BJ, but again, the Sephardic tradition will follow something like that. Now, if you go to page 20, so page 19 and page 20 are basically Psalm 99. So this is the psalm that represents Thursday, okay? And here, in a way, we actually, right now, we're doing a melody that is definitely different. Moshe ve'Aaron b'choanav u'Shmuel b'korei shemo koreim el Adonai ve'hu yanem ve'amud hanan yedaber alehem. Okay, so all these melodies, in this case, only apply to this particular psalm. But if you were to go to other shuls, they might actually sing Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu le'ar kodsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu, and do it in the same modality that they were doing the other psalms. So far so good? Okay, so this basically to tell you that what we just did, forget Yedid Nefesh, but from Lechuria Nena up to here is a much more uniform, both from a point of view as sounds that are in a sequence, and from a melodic point of view, this, in particular if we go to a different shul, the melodic will actually be more coherent and more resemble one sound to the other, okay? In our case, we are kind of driving you a bit crazy and using different melodies for different sounds and different modalities within the sounds. But up to this point, but that's right. So this, to the concept of building, there's definitely something about the liturgy in a way is supposed to help you, in a way, bring you to the place of the moment, the highest point, which happens to be the Amidah. That's the point. So in a way, Kabbalat Shabbat is definitely much more celebratory than once we start the service of Arvit. But in a way, Kabbalat Shabbat will bring us to Shabbat. And so is the modality of bring us, and this crescendo that you could actually have will bring us to Shabbat. At the same time, I will say, if Kabbalat Shabbat takes us 40 minutes to go through, there's a limit. If you do a crescendo, so that by minute 40 you get to the highest point, then the crescendo will have to be linear in a way like this, but we might actually go more like going up and down. So maybe Shir Adonai might actually have its own curve, and we'll celebrate Shirul Adonai, and then might actually come down a little bit, and then eventually do something in a much calmer way, and then go up again. But there's definitely a curve. If you were to somehow look at any service, you can eventually, from an energy point of view, from tempo and everything, you can see that curve, that crescendo in the modality of the service. And in general, we try to be intentional on some of the things. One of them is actually what we're going to be doing now, which is on page 21.
So you purposely want to have that up and down?
Again,
I'm curious.
no, part of the dynamic of the service, if you were to just be linear, and let's say some 95, it would be at a lower energy than 96, and then 97 would be higher, 98. Okay. As you move forward, you could potentially think about that each one will have a crescendo to bring you to eventually culminate with this psalm, which is for Friday, and then eventually with Lechado D, and then these two psalms of Shabbat, and then ready for Shabbat with the evening service. Okay? Because it's a much, the progression takes a long time, in reality, it's more like curves that move like this, instead of like being linear. So you might actually have an energy point in Shir Adonai, as I said before, and not necessarily in the following psalm. Okay? So page 21, page 260, you have Psalm 29, which is Mizmor LeDavid, and this psalm is a psalm that is used both for, in a way, as the last psalm of the weekdays. Okay, it's also used when we carry the Torah when we return the Torah on Shabbat morning. So it's the same text, the same psalm. The rabbis, in a way, felt like that was the right psalm to finish this section of the Kabbalat Shabbat right before Lechado D, but it's also the same psalm that is used. So you can see how eventually, like how, and it's likely that whoever was the rabbi who chose to use this psalm for something was not the same rabbi who chose it to use it for the other thing, and it probably maybe there were some of the things were centuries apart as to apply it to something, but somehow the different the liturgy in a way evolved. As I was saying before, the liturgy of this section is not that old. It's a few centuries old, but it's not Missinai, as I said before. So one of the most traditional melodies that we use here, traditional for BJ, okay, is again it's a Karlebach melody, and I did it a bit before just to show you that scale that I said. Mizmor LeDavid, Avla Adonai bnei Elim, Avula Adonai, Kavod Vavos. Okay, so you know it. Okay, yep. So I want to keep moving because I don't want to concentrate. I spent too much time on the first sections, but my point is that this is a good example of a modality from a music point of view, okay? And since some people actually don't get that modality, it's for most people it's much more comfortable to sing. So some people sing Mizmor LeDavid, Avul Adonai bnei. I cannot do it. It's extremely hard for me to do it. But if you go to many shuls, because they're not accustomed with instruments, it's so much easier to keep to this. Mizmor LeDavid. You cannot sing Mizmor. You cannot sing that. If someone is playing an instrument, it will keep you in track with that modality. But that's one of the melodies that we sing. Sometimes we sing Avul Adonai, Avul Adonai bnei Elim, Avul Adonai kavod va'oz, Avul Adonai kevod shemo. So probably these are the two melodies that we've been using the most for this particular psalm, which is the I would say Yeah, I will stay to those two melodies. Whenever you come to service, it's likely we're going to be using one of those two. And then we get into Lechado D, okay? And this is, again, when we were talking about that curve within the series of Kabbalat Shabbat, the Lechado D, which is not a psalm, it's a piyut, so it's a text that is obviously centuries and centuries after the book of Psalms was written. So this piyut of Lechado D has page 23, 262 on Sim Shalom, is something that we probably, if you think about choosing melodies, Lechado D is likely the one that actually wins by far in terms of like how many melodies we actually have to choose. And so it might take you longer to grasp a melody because from Shabbat to Shabbat we might not necessarily be using the same melody, and maybe a melody might appear once and maybe one might not do it for 2 months or something like that. Although there are some melodies that we tend to use more often, like when we sing Lechado Di Likrat Kana B'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Okay, that I'll come back to that melody in a second, but just to say, we do it, and many shuls also do it. Lechado Di has 9 verses, okay? That if you look at the first letter of each stanza, it's an acrostic that actually spells the name of the writer. So it's Shin for Shamor v'Zachor, Likrat Shabbat is a Lamed, so it's Shin, Lamed, Mem, Hey. That's basically the name Shlomo. And then Halevi, okay? So that was the name. So and then Boi v'Shalom is not part of that sequence.
Is that why you do this? Because you often do 2. But
So I'm going to go back to that. So of these 9 verses, we tend to divide the first 5 verses and the last 4, where the first 5 verses are usually sung. We tend to sing it to a melody that is more calm, and then the last 4 is much more celebratory, okay? And there's certain things that develop at BJ, the way that we do it, like Marshall, for those of you who knew Marshall or heard of Marshall, was the rabbi who in a way is responsible for revitalizing BJ in the 80s. He's the one who brought both Rolly and myself, and Marcelo was also here. So Marshall was a rabbi who spent time in Argentina, and that synagogue that he created in Argentina was what, in a way, inspired this new BJ that happens in the last 40 years. So Marshall used to love to sing Hitoreri, Hitoreri. So when he passed away, we kind of like wanted, it was his verse, so the community in a way took ownership of that fifth verse, okay, which was sung by Marshall in a way, kind of like we are not singing, and eventually the community took the ownership of that verse. And then the other thing that happens is that after the collapse of the ceiling at BJ, we started dancing because we realized nobody got hurt. The ceiling collapsed between Friday night and Saturday morning. So these last 4 verses that many people, it's pretty common to actually switch melodies. And even some composers actually wrote the melodies for Lechado D in a way that each verse might actually switch melodies, which makes it even more confusing. But for us, in general, we tend to have 5 verses in one style of music, if you want to call it, and the last 4 in a more celebratory, and that's in general when people used to dance. And again, since COVID, somehow people felt that maybe dancing was maybe too much. I don't know if it was as we got older or we got tired, I don't know what it was. It's actually more on us, more on you, because we are singing the same melody, so if you want to jump and dance, you can do it. But let me just go through some of the melodies that we do on Lecha Dodi. So again, this melody that I did before, Lecha Dodi, which is one of the more celebratory ones, we might do it for the last 4 verses. One of the melodies that we've been doing is which is Manavu alai, 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 alai. It's a melody, it's an Iraqi melody to a piyut, Manavu alai, and we basically do that melody and we sing sometimes to Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, bene Shabbat, nekabela. Okay? Another melody that sometimes we use, and we actually use it not so much for Lecha Dodi, but we use it for other parts of Saturday morning, of the Friday night service, is a piyut that is part of what we sing during the meals, when we sing Ki Eshmera Shabbat. Okay, sometimes we sing actually we have not really done so much. I don't want to confuse too much. But we sing sometimes. We do. I'm sorry, I just changed. That's why I was looking at the wrong page.
We never know.
That's why. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, shamor v'zachor. So this is a melody that Carlebach wrote. I'm trying to remember if he actually wrote it for Lecha Dodi. I don't even know, but there are plenty of synagogues that actually use this melody for Lecha Dodi. I think he wrote it as Yaribon. Yaribon alam ve'almaya, and many people started singing to Lecha Dodi. We used to sing this melody for Hinematov. Hinematov umanahim shevet achim gam yachad. So we sing Lecha Dodi likrat kala ben Shabbat nekabela. So some of you might actually not remember that we used to sing it for Hinematov, but you might have heard it to Lecha Dodi. So this is a good melody that is a good example of melodies that we use. Another melody that sometimes we use frequently. So this melody is not a Carlebach melody. It's called it's a Bratslav. The Bratslav, they say the same way that you can think about Chabad as being a group. There's another group, Hasidic group called the Bratslav. Okay, again, Carlebach was part of Chabad, but again, Carlebach composed so many melodies that Carlebach, if you think about it, could be part of Chabad, but in reality is its own compositions that are Carlebach. Bratslav, to my taste, is one of the most beautiful compositions of, like, there's so many different melodies that are for different parts of the service, and it's one of the nicest, kind of, many times they are like, so this feeling of 3, it has a more calming quality. yararai, yararai, ay, yararai, ay, yararai, ay, yararai, lecha dodi, likrat kala. Okay, the problem with this melody is that this melody basically has, and I'm talking just this melody, which is the Bratslav melody, is written as 5 different melodies. One is lecha dodi, okay, which eventually is Shamor Vezachor. Then the refrain will be Yararai, Yararai, Ay, Yararai, Ay, Yararai, Ay, Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. Okay. Now for the second verse, instead of singing da-dai, da-da-da, da, you sing yai, 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 yai. So again, you have already there. You have 3 melodies: refrain, melody for verse 1, melody for verse 2. The good thing is that they keep it kind of simple, and verse 3 uses the same melody as verse 1. Melody is verse 5 uses the same as 3. So basically, you have melody A, B, A, B. Okay, so it's not that confusing. But then when we get to the first part, it goes to. That's actually part of the. It's still part of the first 5 verses. Okay, once we get into the 6th verse. Lecha dodi likrat kala bene Shabbat nekavla. Lecha dodi likrat kala bene Shabbat nekavla. Ay 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 ay. Okay, so those there you have actually. So I was wrong. It's not. You have 2 melodies for the first part, and a melody for just the refrain, and then for the last 4 verses, again you have 2 completely different melodies for the last 4 verses, and a different melody for the refrain. Okay, same in a way, it's the same composition. Was it written all as one composition? I'm not so sure, because it feels there's definitely a change of pace, definitely when we get to the end, but. That's how many of the Bratslav Hasidim sing it. So it could be that at some point they adopted this composition that Eleanor wrote because they like it, and then they like the melody that I wrote, but they don't want to give up the one that Eleanor wrote, so they sing both. So that's also a possibility. How these melodies also may have developed in some groups.
In your favorite
I don't know. That one is actually probably one of one of the most favorite melodies. It's such a sweet melody, and it has it all. I'm blanking on the other melody that is also a Bratslav melody. It might come back. But if you listen to services, there are some other melodies that have a similar flavor as to very sweet. It might also be another Bratslav melody. And by the way, one of the things that we're working on, but it's not going to be done anytime soon, but yes, we're working on Saturday morning, is that we're trying to create, so you can go to the YouTube channel and listen to the service and listen to different melodies, but we're trying to create almost like a catalog with different melodies for the same text.
Wow.
Okay, that we're basically taking one section from a recording from an actual service, and we're trying to organize it in a way that is going to be friendly. I don't know if we're going to add the words or not, but you might still need to have the CD in front of you. but the idea will be that some of the things that we're flying through, you will be able to do by having that tool, which will be more like okay, the Halodi, Bratslav melody, that's one. Bratslav melody number 2, that's a melody, okay? And I'm trying to remember the other melodies. I'm blanking. I should have written the. This one is another melody we use. Okay, do it a little loud. That's based on a melody that was written for a pute called Samanafshi, okay? And we sing it sometimes for the Halodi. Is there a melody that sometimes we sing? Yeah, so as we're gonna get closer to the summer, closer to Tisha B'Av, there's a melody that we tend to sing around Tisha B'Av, which is אם אשכחך ירושלים, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת It's a beautiful Karlemach melody too, but we tend to only do it around the time of Tisha B'Av because it's part of this Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim, which is a text that many times we sing on Tisha B'Av. So let me jump to the next thing. So I was maybe too optimistic on trying to do all this. So this is the time we normally will welcome mourners if they're mourners, okay? And then we move into Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat. So I mentioned that each day of the week gets one psalm, and then Shabbat gets 2 psalms. So there's only one psalm in the book of Psalms that actually refers to a particular day. This is the one, refers to Shabbat. Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat. So they made it's obvious, and it was an obvious choice to use as for one of the psalms for Shabbat. And then the other psalm is the psalm Adonai Malach, which is Psalm 93, which you see on page 29. So here we also have different melodies. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. That's one of the melodies that we use. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני. Again, different melodies, same text for this particular psalm. Another melody we use is Tov lehodot. No, we don't use that melody. How we sing Tov lehodot?
What?
Tov lehodot.
I can't sing it.
ולזמר לשמך עליון, טוב טוב להודות לאדוני. ulezame, ulezame. So that melody is, again, it's a different melody, different modality for the same, okay? There's a Carlebach melody that we have not done in many years, but it's Tov lehodot l'Hashem, da la 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 la. So again, this, going back to that curve, all these different melodies help us create a curve. Like if something, after October 7, we did melodies that were much more mournful for a long time. And we didn't do any of these very celebratory melodies that sometimes we might do if something happier will actually happen. So sometimes we are influenced by something that happens within the BJ community or something that maybe happen in the larger community. And then in general, actually, if you go to page 28, you will find this Hatimah, this seal of this Psalm 92, which is something that we don't sing it so often to this melody, but it's a melody that many people will sing. Tzadikata Amari Ifrach Ke'erez Balevanon Izge. Okay, so you know the melody. We tend to use the same modality that we did for whatever we did for the beginning. So if we did Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, then we'll probably sing Tzadik Katamar Ifrach. Okay, so all of these two psalms for Shabbat, if you think about the beginning, the end of the psalm, and then the end of the following psalm, which is also part of the Shabbat, kind of like two psalms, almost like on Shabbat, the tradition says that we were given two manot, okay? So in a way, Shabbat represents these two, kind of like these two psalms. Some people say is because of this, the receiving two portions for Shabbat. The two halot. Mikolot ma'im rabim. Or if you did a different melody, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, Tov le'agid ki ashar Adonai, and then we'll do the last one. We'll by sing Edotecha nemnu meot. So the same motif, whichever we started with, will stay within these two psalms. So at least we don't drive you that crazy in that moment. That we will try to keep the melodies kind of like weaving through these two psalms. And then we get to eventually to Kabbalah, to Arvit. Okay, so I'm going to just go really fast. We're definitely past the time that we said that the session will end, but we started a few minutes late. But I want to go fast. Baruch. So if you go to page 39a, to page 270 on Sim Shalom, you will find Baruch. Baruch et Adonai. Okay, which is, in this one we try to stick a bit more to the Nusach. So if you look at that page, you'll see that there's an arrow, Umaviriom, Umev, Umaviriom, Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach, the same kind of flavor there. Okay, that minor scale. And if you look at page 40, Ve'avatcha, ki em chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nehegei yomam v'layla, tarararara. This will repeat, again, from a structural point of view, we spoke about Kabbalat Shabbat having these psalms preceding Lechadodi, and then these two psalms they represent in each day of the week. In Arvit, the structure is that you have Baruch Hu as a call to prayer, and then you have two blessings, okay, before Shema, and then you have two blessings after the Shema, and then eventually you go to the Amidah. That's what the structure of any evening service. All these Hatimot in general will actually have a similar flavor. Da, 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 da. Even the end of Shema, Adonai Elohechem Emet. Or if you go to page 45, which is for the I'm skipping Micha Mocha for a second, but if you go to page page 45, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, they all have a similar flavor. If you go to the page before, on page 44, you have the end of this the first blessing after the Shema, which is basically contains the Micha Mocha, and in general here we actually sing a song. So we do. Here's what the one I wanted to sing before. Sometimes we do Umalchuto veratzon kibelu alehem. Or sometimes we sing Rai 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 Ai Da Da Rai Ai Da Da Rai Rai Ai Da Da. Sometimes we sing Rai Da 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 Rai Da Da Rai Rai Da 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 Rai. All these are melodies that were not written for Micha Mocha, but we just adopted for Micha Mocha. And in general, when we get to the Vene'emar, sometimes we actually will go back to Vene'emar. And basically, I'm staying on page 44 between the top of the page and the last few lines, which is the Hatimah, the end of that, which is the prayer. Okay? So I was saying before, the Hatimah, this seal. So there's a prayer for, in this case, a prayer for redemption. So the last blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Israel. Blessed are you, Adonai, who redeemed the people of Israel. Okay? So the whole the prayer for redemption actually starts on page 43a, which is right after the Shema. And we go silently, and again, I said before, these synchronizers of using this melody just to say, okay, now you should have already finished, hopefully, the silent part. Let's get together and sing the next section. Okay? Then we move into, in theory, we're going to move into the Amidah, but before we do the Amidah, in a normal weekday, actually, on every service, you're familiar with the concept of Kaddish, okay? So Kaddish appears in different formats. One of the formats is what is called Hatzi Kaddish, which translates into half a Kaddish. It's not really half, but it's basically like the shortest version of Kaddish. You're familiar with the mourner's Kaddish. There's another one that's called Kaddish Shalem, which is the full Kaddish. There's another version which is Kaddish de Rabbanan, and there are other forms of Kaddish. They say for a burial, there's a Kaddish that is used for burial. There are other forms of just the Kaddish, which is basically the same text of the Kaddish, plus some additional sections that are added in different contexts. Okay? In general, the Hatzi Kaddish, the shorter version of the Kaddish, is used to divide two sections within the service. Okay, so there's a Hatzi Kaddish in this case to basically say, okay, we just finished the first part of the Arvit service, and we're about to start the Amidah. So there's a Hatzi Kaddish there, okay, on page 46. So that will be the case on any given day of the week. It will be after the blessing for peace. It will be a Hatzi Kaddish as a divider for the next thing. And then we use Kaddish Shalem, the full Kaddish, to divide major sections. Okay, so in this case, the Kaddish, the really major section that I divide is only when the service is about to finish, then this Kaddish Shalem at the end of the evening service. Many synagogues, and sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't, there's a mourner's Kaddish between Kabbalat Shabbat and Arvit, which in a way serves as that divider. So Kaddish serves that little break between sections. On Shabbat, before we say Katzi Kaddish, we actually sing a section which is called Veshamru, okay? And we sing it sometimes, Veshamru B'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, which is a Karlebach melody, okay? And sometimes we sing, Veshamru B'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. In particular, if we were doing this section before to that melody, which is an Israeli melody, contemporary, whatever, so maybe by now it's probably 50 years old, I don't know how old it is, Erev Shoshanim. It's definitely, I don't know if it was from the 60s or 70s. So it's a really relatively modern, at least for us, it feels like a modern melody that we apply to this text. And then we go to Chatzi Kaddish. Then the Amidah on the evening service, on any day in the evening, the evening Amidah is always silent. It's that silently. So there's not really a melody there, more than we'll eventually finish the Amidah with something. And that something could be Oseh Shalom, could be a Nigun, or could be something else. And there you actually also have like many choices of melodies that we do. I don't want to focus too much on that. And then we go into page 53, which has Vayecholu. Page 314 on Sim Shalom, page 53 on Lev Shalem. So you have Vayechulu Hashamayim ve'aretz, so Vayechulu Hashamayim ve'aretz v'chol tzevam. The different melodies or different modes of singing the Vayechulu, which is followed by, which is called Mein Sheva. The Amidah, you might be familiar with saying the Shmona Esrei. Okay, Shemona Esrei is basically number 18, okay? Because during the week, there are 18 prayers in the Amidah. Not really, but traditionally, there are 18 prayers within the Amidah. As I said before, Shabbat has a shorter version, so instead of, we do the first 3 are the same, and the last 3 are the same. Yeah, but there's one in the middle that is added for Shabbat, and there all these prayers for petition are removed on Shabbat. So eventually it ends up being a shorter section, so instead of being 18, it's 7, and that's why Ein Sheva developed into this, like an abbreviated version of saying the Amidah. So, which in general, so we do Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Eloheinu, Elohotenu, Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak. So that's that second paragraph on page 53. And then we go into Magen Avot, the bottom of page 53. Magen Avot bidvaro mechayeh metim, u'Magen Avot bidvaro. Those are probably the only 2 melodies that we sing. And then we finish this section on top of page 54 with this paragraph that has this blessing that ends with Mekadesh Shabbat, which is the blessing, which is to make Shabbat holy. Okay, so this in a way represents the end of the service, and then it goes Kaddish Shalem. Which I said before was used as a divider. Okay, the service formally ends, and then we go into. We stayed for a few more minutes doing certain things, but the liturgy of the service in a way ended there, and then Kiddush is done at that time. Kiddush belongs to the dinner, but for a variety of reasons, it was adopted to sing the Kiddush, to allow people to be able to say it, in particular for the people who were, like I'm talking about back then, people who were going to a shul and sleeping in the shul, okay? And the Arab people were going, and so they were doing the Kiddush there. So the tradition eventually, when that was not the case anymore, the tradition stayed to actually still sing the Kiddush. So that's why we sing the Kiddush on Friday night, which is on Friday night, at dinner is via Hulu, is part of the Kiddush, but on Friday night it's not included as part of the Kiddush. And then we go to Aleinu L'Shabbat, which is also something that was added at a later time. And then after Aleinu, we do the Morris Kaddish, which in a way, again, is another divider to say, really, we finished, but we haven't, because we eventually sing something to finish the service, which could be Igdal, or could be, when sometimes we sing Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, or we might sing something different. So I just ran through the last part of the service, but the last part of the service is definitely not as rich in melody, and it's more, a tiny bit more coherent with this, using the nusach. So hopefully I didn't lose you as I was rushing through the end. So I hope that you, actually, let me, before you say that, you have questions? Any questions? I want to see some.
Actually, I am.
Go ahead.
So, how did it get, how did Aleinu get into Yom Kippur that we bow down and say it 5 times?
So some people believe actually Aleinu was actually written for that part of Malchuyot, and that eventually made it into the liturgy of the day on a daily.
So it wasn't too stupid.
No.
The question.
No. Again, I'm not.
I'm doing it my whole life. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, not having a formal music background, I learned so much, and I was just gonna say, I thought that B'nai Jeshurun used Sephardic tunes. I heard a lot of minor key, so I just assumed, oh, that's Friday. I had no idea that it was using so many compact tunes.
Yeah. But again, this is true of the last maybe 25 years, and before that we were not using those melodies.
Oh, so you were using
Some more traditionally, or maybe, I would say the influence of more Sephardic melodies, we already, by the time that Marshall created the synagogue in Argentina, was already a mix between Ashkenazi and Sephardic families. So there was already an influence of Sephardic music there, like when we sing Adon Olam Asher Malach, that's when we sing da 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 mi those are Sephardic melodies. Okay. Over the last many years, I don't know if it's, I would say the last 15, 20 years, Roli had been bringing more and more an influence of Piyutim. So, and some of the Piyutim were written actually in North Africa, or even some of the Piyutim, like Lechal Dodi, was actually an influence of Sephardic from a text point of view, and many actually from a melodic point of view as well. But again, you have things like Lechal Dodi that is part of the mainstream on both Ashkenazi and Sephardic, so you have melodies that were written both in the Sephardic community and the Ashkenazi community. But I don't know if that made it more confusing or not, but
I had no idea,
yeah.
but that harmonic
Yeah.
tunes were so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Sorry, Piyut means poem, so Piyutim refers to medieval poems. So there's a culture of writing writing poems that started maybe over 1,000 years ago, and then these writers were writing these poems that eventually made it into the liturgy. A little bit, let's say, when we sing the Halodi, Igdal, Adon Olam, all those are Piyutim, the same way that it made it more, it has more of an influence on the songs of Shabbat. So Ki Shmira Shabbat, Yaribon, and all.
Roli has introduced new, he's found other ones that he's incorporated into the liturgy
So-
expression you're saying?
No, not so much. I would say
The melody.
if you come to his sessions that he does, sometimes some of the melodies, because what he definitely brought was teams that were more obscure and were not really part of the liturgy of the canon of things that are used.
Oh, like when you have like the little booklets.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Several are in
Yeah,
the little
that's what
book.
That's
those-
right.
That's what those
The
are.
fa si ri la it's a piyut
Okay.
that refers to healing, and we started using it for doing the Torah service at the time of the prayer for healing.
Okay.
So there were piyutim that were written for certain sections of the service, and some we adopted. Maybe we adopted the melody when we sing. Dai 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 dai, ha, la, dai dai dai. It's a piyut that we learn as the original piyut, but right now we only use the melody to adapt to the text.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
I think if you're hearing a melody and you don't know if it's Sephardic or Ashkenazic or.
Doesn't matter.
Is there anything that
That
distinguishes it?
Unless you're a scholar, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
No, but if you're just interested to know.
I would say in general Sephardic melodies are simpler,
Knowledge of music.
but it's not completely true for everyone. There are plenty of Sephardic melodies that we're learning on the class of the piyutim that are very confusing. But yeah, I don't know if they said. Again, there's some scales. It's actually Ashkenazi. They have that is more. Because I feel like that's a melody that so many people know that it's extremely easy for them to realize. Okay, that's scale.
It's amazing class. We're so lucky.
So if you want to join me next week, we'll try to cover Saturday morning.
You mean next week?
Next week on Wednesday.
Oh, no.
What do we have for next year? I have to put it in my
You're
calendar.
right, it's Wednesday.
I think it's Wednesday the 18th. I'm pretty sure.
I came here tonight because I was certain that we all know Kabbalah Shabbat,
Uh-huh.
and that I'm just coming to be here for you.
Good.
But I
I need you to come here for me. I need you.
But the
Yes.
truth is,
So
it was a very.
it's great to see you all.
Absolutely.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat. Come to services in person or live stream and join us.
Well,
Okay.
we're the groupies.
We're the group. It's important to have a group.
Huh?
I made them in.
You're a good girl. I'm not so good because, as she
But you're
said,
on time.
I'm older.
Then what?
I don't get up so early anymore.
You know, somebody.
And I need more time in the morning.
See, that's what I was saying to someone, and this is a person that, knows a lot about old people, and says, oh no, older people get up early.
I do many days, but not on the vineyards.
And I'm reading and.
Yeah, I'm the same, I get up late, I have things, I'm taking off.
But there's more things to put on, more cream, more makeup, more brassiere, more,
More